Great, guys. Welcome to our video today. This one I'm making specifically for the folks who are out there looking for homes and want to know a little bit about the buying process on the loan side and what that looks like, some things that you should be aware of, and the overall timeline of what that looks like. So we've got Taylor Hendricks here from Intercap.
Yep.
Anyway, we're going to go and dive deep into what that looks like and get going from there. So Taylor, let's get started. The first step.
Yeah, the first step. So it'll be the main initial thing is obviously knowing what you can qualify for. Because before you want to go look at a house, you want to make sure that you can afford it. The original start is just going to be talking to myself. It's typically a 5 to 10 minute call, nothing major. We don't pull credit or anything else unless we really need to. The main things is we'll go over your credit, we'll go over income, down payment, and then any monthly debts that you have as well. But again, it's pretty minor. There's nothing major. You don't have to have exact perfect numbers. They help, but they're not essential. And that'll give us a rough idea on exactly what you qualify for. And then we'll go ahead and have you work with Terry, get it all started, to be able to go find a house in that price range that you're looking for. Once that happens, you guys are under contract. We'll go ahead and start the loan process. And that'll start off just by finishing up your application, getting the loan locked. And then I'll also send out a list of items to return, which is typically, if you're working on a W-2 wage, it'll be your last 2 years of W-2s, last 30 days of pay stubs, bank statements, and other items there. We'll send you a full list that you can work on and send back to us to get you started. Once that's done, then we'll go through and we'll do the underwriting process. The underwriting process, typically once we get your documents, is about a week and a half to 2 weeks. That's where we'll get all of your documents together, get them ready, and send them to the underwriter, and they'll typically give us back an approval. If there's anything that the underwriter is missing, they'll let us know, and that way we can go through and get those documents from you. It happens sometimes, but not all the time. Typically, we'll just get everything, we'll get the approval, and once we have that approval, about a week and a half to 2 weeks later, finishing up the process 3 to 4 weeks afterwards is kind of from start to finish. We'll go through and sign the documents at the title company and get you the keys.
Just like that.
Just like that.
That's great. So throughout this process, there's quite a bit that goes into it. On the pre-qual, how long does a pre-qual take?
Just a really basic item. I would say I'm on the phone anywhere between 5 and 20 minutes, just depending on if somebody has questions. If there are no questions, it can be a 5-minute phone call and you're done. With questions, I can go as long as we need to, and I'm happy to take as long as we need to for it.
And I want to emphasize real quick the importance of a pre-qual. As we're going through and we're looking at houses, we're writing offers, and we have all those things set up. A seller that gets an offer without a pre-qual letter, and they say, okay, we just got this offer, but we have no idea if they're qualified for anything. Honestly, if you don't have that, as far as I'm concerned, on the listing side, I say this offer, it's not worth anything to me. There's no verification there. I have no idea if they're just BSing all these numbers or what the deal is there. Yep. So a pre-qual letter, in my opinion, is super important. I know some folks say, I don't want to do that and I don't want to commit. I think both Taylor and I are on the same page here. A pre-qual letter is just a really good way for you to get your numbers and see where you're at. It's in no way a full commitment. Taylor doesn't have you sign anything. I don't have you sign anything. Nope. It's just a good way for you to get a good idea of where you're at. And then we know what those numbers are so we can find things that are actually relevant to you and then move forward that way.
Well, I think that's perfect because I have a lot of people that, maybe they can qualify for, heck, it happens all the time. Somebody can qualify for $1 million, but they don't want their payment above $1,600. And so even if you're not looking to see how high you can qualify, it's always good to give me a call just to see, with your exact budget, what your price point is going to be, maybe 200, 300, 400,000, whatever it is, but I can break down those numbers for you and give you monthly payments in all the areas you're looking. So you do have a really good idea even before you take a step into the house.
And what are some of the issues that frequently come up throughout the loan process that are good to be avoided, or just good tips that we can share to make sure that, hey, we're avoiding X, Y, Z?
Yeah, the biggest one, please right now, even before we start the process, is please do not go get your credit pulled or don't get your credit pulled, and especially don't buy a truck, don't buy a boat, don't buy anything crazy. We've had that happen once or twice, and the lender always figures out about it, and it's caused some issues sometimes. So the biggest thing is while you're going for that, please avoid any and all of that. That's the biggest one. The other one I would say is a lender always looks for consistency. So if you, they want to see, for example, if you're a full-time employee working 40 hours a week, well, if 1 month for some reason you took it off and you're like, you know what, I'm just going to work 20 hours this week. I don't know what employer would allow that, but we've seen it. They will look at the lower amounts. So it's just always try to be sure that your income is still staying consistent with what's average and what's normal. And then the other item is just the credit, making sure that doesn't happen.
And then once the loan's started as well, is there any things that, like, pretty often we have a hard time receiving XYZ docs or anything else that, the listeners can kind of be prepared for? So, maybe it's not as big a surprise. When I just did mine, I didn't see anything that was a surprise, but I'm also involved in this every day. So
yeah, and I don't think there's any one specific thing, but I mean, your list of items, just a quick little list is photo ID, copy of the earnest money check, which I'm sure Terry will talk to you about, bank statements, pay stubs, and W-2s. So and like maybe an insurance agent. There's nothing crazy, believe it or not. It's sometimes we'll have a hard time tracking down one of the items, but overall there's nothing specific. So
and we can talk about this, and I talk about this in other videos, is just making sure that we have everything set up and you get everything to the lender in time, right? So if you're like, hey, Taylor said he can do this in 4 weeks, I'll wait until week 3 to start getting him things. That's not the way things work. We usually have a finance and appraisal deadline where your earnest money, I don't want to go too deep into all this vocabulary, but you have your earnest money deposit that's on the line, and that can be anywhere between $1 and I've seen it as high as $50,000, right? So if you're trying to pull out after your finance and appraisal deadline because there's some sort of issue with your loan or something like that, if we don't find those things out soon, then you could end up losing your earnest money.
Yep.
I've never had any of my clients lose theirs. So there's no reason why we should. It's just staying on top of the ball as you go throughout the process.
Yeah, typically what I say, because your average process our average is about 3 weeks from start to close. Sometimes it can be up to 4, and we can even do it down to 2 weeks. But I typically say if we need a 3-week close, it's 3 weeks from the day I get all the documents from the client. That way it's not, we're waiting, exactly like you said, we're waiting for 3 weeks to get them, and then we do need them up front in order to make sure we meet those deadlines.
Perfect. And then let's talk about credit real quick. I want this video to be shorter, and this will be one of the last things we talk about. But on the credit side, there's a misconception on some people's end. One is during the pre-qualification process where they want to shop it out. They say, hey, I don't want to get a hard pull from 4 or 5 different companies, or I already got one, I don't want to get another hard pull.
Yep.
Do you want to talk about that real quick and how many hard pulls you can get within X amount of time without it affecting your credit?
Yeah. So credit-wise, there is a law in place that says that if you've had your credit pulled for a mortgage, for example, within 30 days and somebody else does pull, that pull won't ding your score. What I have seen, for example, is somebody pulls credit with a lender, and then the next day, for some reason, they had to max out their credit card and then gets it pulled by somebody else. That credit card's still going to hurt you, but the actual pull itself won't. So as long as your credit's pretty much the same, you should get almost an identical, if not identical, credit score from 2 different people. During the pre-qualification, I like to pull, but it's not. Some people don't want me to do that, and so I won't pull at that moment. But yeah, you definitely can pull multiple times. Just make sure that you're not maxing out credit cards and all that stuff in between, because that's where you'll see your differences.
I actually like that, and I don't know if I want to place too much emphasis on it, but I think it's a point worth noting. One of the reasons why I use Taylor quite a bit myself personally is exactly that. I mean, not everyone's in a position where, maybe they already know where their credit is pretty close to it, and maybe they want to do things later on, or they're just in a kind of non-committal place. You're just kind of shopping out the market, but you want to get a good idea of what your numbers are. Most lenders are going to ask for a hard pull right then and there. Taylor's been good to work with in the sense that he says, hey, let's get a good idea of where it is. Obviously, the numbers differ a little bit if we're off on the credit that you're giving us.
Of course. But
assuming we're on that, here's what your numbers look like. Take this information and in just a very non-committal way, and you have all this information, all this data, and you can go out and do with it whatever you want without feeling like, man, I already had my credit pulled, I'm pretty much locked in, I have to do X, Y, Z, and if I don't buy, then it hurt my credit. Anyway, those are all things that are worth noting, and some of the reasons why I actually like working with Taylor.
Exactly it. Yeah, perfect. That's good to hear.
But great. Well, I really don't want to spend too much more time on this video. I want this to be relatively quick so folks get the overall overview. But is there anything else you'd want to share or anything else that's important throughout this loan process?
I don't think there's much. I just think a lot of people get very stressed on the process, and it's not too bad. It's really not. As long as we get those documents and everything's in line and we're staying in pretty good contact with each other, the process is a lot easier, more simple, and way less stressful than most people think.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Taylor.
Yeah.
And thank you to you guys for watching this video. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. But otherwise, I hope this has been beneficial and gives you a pretty good idea of where everything's at and what you need to be doing to preparing to purchase your next home or investment property. Thanks so much.